Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Honeybee Stamps Love Letters 6x6 paper pad. I also purchased the coordinating gem stickers. I love to have these since all of the colors match beautifully with the pattern papers. I love the colors in this collection. Goes from the reds to the pinks, oranges, and yellows. And I'm not really much of an orange fan, but I love the papers in this collection. There are also a couple of pattern papers that just have a black and white image. So I have the little Happy Mail envelopes with the hearts and also the heart paper. So you could color those or you could ink them up, whatever you want, or you can keep them as the black and white. And I really like that this collection works year-round. There are a few of the heart and love pattern papers, but most of the patterns you could use for any card occasion. So let's go ahead and jump right into my first set of cards. I'm using that black and white paper with all the Happy Mail, and I'm going to do some ink blending to add color to this pattern paper. I have 3 different Distress Oxide inks. I'm starting off with the Picked Raspberry, this beautiful pink color. Then I'll be adding in the Spice Marmalade and also Squeezed Lemonade. And I'm using Pink & Main's Ergonomic Blending Brush. This is my favorite tool when I'm ink blending a large background. They also have a mini ergonomic blending brush, which works nicely as well. After I've added the 3 colors, I'm going to go back in with the pink and just do another coat between the pink and the orange, and then I'm also using the orange and doing another coat just to blend those colors out more. So there is that beautiful background. I love the bold colors. I'll put some ATG tape on the back and adhere this panel onto a card base. And I know that's very odd, I'm not adding a cardstock layer. Instead, I cut out this scalloped rectangle frame. This is by MFT. And I use some beautiful holographic cardstock by Tonic Studios. I'm going to put some liquid adhesive on the back, and then I'll glue it directly onto this card. And it's going to leave about maybe 1/4 of an inch around the outside edge. So get good coverage with the glue. You can see all that beautiful rainbow shine when my lights hit that paper. So press it down, give it a little more rub by flipping over the card, and then I'll start working on the sentiment. One of my favorite stamp sets from Honeybee Stamps' new release is called Hugs Enclosed. It has that really large 6x6 panel with the Happy Mail, but I mainly bought it for this stamp. I love the Happy Mail sentiment. I stamped this on some white cardstock using Versafine Clair ink, and now I'm using the Rainbow Wishes embossing powder from Love from Lizi. It has this beautiful iridescent sparkle. So once I heat set this, it's still going to be that black color from the ink, but it will have that gorgeous color when the light hits it. So it really all blends together with the background of the card and also that holographic frame. I also purchased the coordinating die set. So I love how there's a die that goes around each of the sentiments and images for the stamp set, other than that large 6x6 image. I've also gone ahead and stamped out another sentiment. So this is Just For You. Put that on some orangish yellow cardstock, glued that down. For the Happy Mail, I did put some thin foam squares on the back. So I'll just remove the release paper and adhere it to the center of the card. Just having the tail of that L nestle above that Just For You sentiment. And finishing touch, I'm going to use an assortment of the coordinating bling, starting off with the pink, and then moving down to the orange and some of the yellow colors. I'm adding 3 gems for each color. So I have 3 of the pinks, 3 orange, and then 3 of the yellow. It's more of a yellowish orange color. So I did end up making 2 cards using this same design, and I love how this card turned out. Super sparkly and lots of shine. Now moving on to card design number 2. I have another pattern paper, has the range of a little bit of red at the top, and then has the orange and the yellow. I'm using Honeybee Stamps Radiant Heart die. I love how it cuts out the rays going around the heart. And I'm going to back it with some gold iridescent cardstock. So it's super shiny. You can see that rainbow where my lights are hitting it. Putting ATG on the back of this panel and also some liquid adhesive, trying to get in all those little tiny areas. Just want to make sure it's not going to pull away from that specialty cardstock. And I did have the right hand side of that radiant heart die go off the edge of the paper. So the image and sentiment will be shifted toward the right, just for some extra interest on the card. So I'm going to put some ATG on the back of this panel and layer it on some red cardstock. Put my card front onto a card base, this time leaving 1/8 of an inch of that white card base showing. And as much as I like to cut out the center of that specialty cardstock and save it for another project, it wasn't really possible to do with this design. I did use some of the same red cardstock from the background layer and filled in that center heart. If I left it that iridescent cardstock, I think it would have been overwhelming. Another favorite stamp set, this is the one I had to buy first, is a Waffle Lot. So it's just a small stamp set that has the waffle and a couple of sentiments. It has a pat of butter and a heart. This image would be very simple to color, but I'm going to do some paper piecing instead. So I stamped the image on some brown cardstock, used the coordinating die to cut it out, and then I stamped it again on this light yellow cardstock and just fussy cut out that syrup. Then I'm using a brown marker and going around that outside edge, just so you don't see that yellow color. It gives the image a finished look and also covers up any little areas maybe I didn't fussy cut out so well. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and then add it to that brown waffle. I mean, this is a very happy waffle with a little smile on the syrup. So I also cut out 2 small pats of butter. I'll just glue those toward the left side of the waffle. Just going to overlap them slightly. Then I'm going to pop up the waffle, so I'm going to add some thin foam squares. And I'll adhere it not quite to the center of the heart. I still want plenty of the heart to show. I've already stamped out the sentiment and used the coordinating dies to cut it out. So I have I like you, a waffle lot. And they also have I love you, a waffle lot. But it's nice that they have the word like as well, especially if you're giving the card to someone you don't really know, because most of my Valentine cards will be going to the residents at a local retirement home. I decided to add a little more detail to the waffle. I'm using Nouveau glitter drops. This is the golden sunset color, putting it at the lower edge of the syrup and also in all the little squares on the waffle. And then one final finishing touch, I'm going to put some glossy accents on the butter. So there is my finished card. I love this one so much. It's probably my favorite card. And I did end up making 2. Now moving on to card design number 3. I'm going to use a card sketch this time. This is by Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 400. I have 2 different pattern papers. I have that ombre floral orange paper and then also the orange polka dot paper. I cut some 3/4 of an inch strips out of that polka dot paper. I adhere them onto some orange cardstock. And before I attach this floral paper, I did fill in that gap with some scrap cardstock, just to make sure everything was at the same level. Now instead of adding cardstock to the edge of that floral paper, I'm going to use some Love from Lizi peel-offs. This is, I believe, the copper color. Using the widest width and just putting it between those 2 pattern papers. It'll add some extra shine and some contrast. I'll put my card front onto a card base. I'm going to leave that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing again. Now I'm not following this sketch exactly. I'm using it more for inspiration. So instead of that square that's indicated on the sketch, I'll be adding my sentiment. And I'm using the Happy Mail sentiment again. So I've stamped this on some of the pattern paper. It's just a solid light orange color. And then I layered that on that same dark orange cardstock and I just offset them slightly. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and then adhere it to the center of the card. And then I also colored up a few of the envelopes, a little happy mail that's included on that same stamp set. I used some Copic markers and did very simple coloring, so I didn't show that process. I cut them out using the coordinating dies, glued them down. I did pop up a couple using some thin foam squares, and then I'll finish off the card adding some of the orange gems. And then I also decided to add a little bit of sparkle to that heart. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 4. Since that orange floral paper is 3 inches wide, I was able to easily make 4 different cards. Now moving on to card design number 4. Using another card sketch, this is from MFT, it's number 399. I'm using this burgundy polka dot pattern paper for the background, and I'll layer it on some mirror cardstock from Tonic Studios. This is the Rustic Dusk color, and unfortunately it is discontinued, but I still have part of a package left. I did cut out the center so I could save it for another project, and I just filled in that gap with some scrap cardstock. For this strip going down the card toward the left, I used some of this beautiful plaid paper, layered that on some more of that mirror cardstock. I did use a scallop die by Pretty Pink Posh to add some extra detail. I'll put my card front onto a card base, and I did use my corner rounder for that upper right hand corner just for some extra detail. I cut out a stitched circle die cut from some white shimmer paper, and then using the heart from card 2, so that was the leftover piece, didn't want to waste that, I'm going to glue that to the center of the circle. So I love how those colors all match with that plaid paper in the background. I've stamped and cut out the sentiment hugs enclosed, and I did add some scrap cardstock to the right hand side, just trying to keep it nice and level. And then I just used some liquid adhesive to adhere it to the card. For finishing touches, I'm going to use some of Honeybee Stamp's Acrylic Hearts in the pure color. These are so pretty. They have, I think, 4 different sizes. They also sell them in a black and yellow color, and I really wish I would have picked those up as well, but maybe for my next order. And I'm following this sketch fairly closely with the placement of the hearts. I have my embellishment wand to help pick those up. Just put a drop of glue and then attach them to the card. And there is my finished card. I did end up making 2 using this sketch. Now moving on to card design number 5. I'm using another of the black and white pattern papers, this time with the sprinkle of hearts all over the background. I'm going to do some Distress Oxide ink blending on it, but this time I'm just using the one color. So this is Festive Berries. I'll just saturate that whole pattern paper, trying to get even coverage. And I'm using a scrap piece of paper just so I don't put my fingers in the ink. So touch up a few other areas, and there is that finished panel. Then I decided to use some Glimmer Mist. I've had this in my craft room forever, so I'm sure it's not available anymore. And I did this off screen. I just spritzed that whole panel with the mist and then let it dry. For the card sketch, I'm using the August 2020 sheet load of cards. This is by Call Me Crafty Al. So I thought this would be really fun. I've been meaning to try out her sheet load of card sketch challenges, so maybe I'll add that to my list for next month. I used some of the Lips pattern paper, and instead of using cardstock, I'm using some Love from Lizi peel-offs. This is the straight design, so it's a little bit wider than the pinstripe, and I just used the black color. I cut them a little bit longer than the panel, and I'll just wrap the ends behind, and then I'll layer this on some black cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base, again leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. For the sentiment, I've already stamped this out. This is Sending XOXO, and this is from Honeybee Stamp's Love Enclosed stamp set. I think this was part of their Valentine release last year. I'm going to layer this on some black cardstock, and then I also cut a thin strip of pattern paper, and I'll just adhere that underneath the sentiment. To add some contrast between those two papers, I'm using the pinstripe peel-offs, again in black, and I'll just trim the edge off so it's even. Before I adhere that to the card, I am going to put some scrap cardstock on the right-hand side, just trying to keep everything nice and level. And I'll adhere that using some liquid adhesive. Since it is going on top of that shimmer finish, I want to make sure it's going to stay attached. Then I cut out 2 small hearts using some red satin paper, and I'll just adhere them to the left-hand side of that sentiment. And I did add scrap pieces of cardstock underneath those hearts, just keeping everything level again. And finishing touch, I'm going to add a couple of these adorable little envelopes with the hearts. This is by Honeybee Stamps. It's one of their clay bits. I'll put 3 of them toward the right of the sentiment. And I'll just adhere those using a drop of liquid adhesive. These would be fun inside a shaker card, but they work as embellishments as well. Also going to add some of the black gems, put 3 of them in the upper right hand corner. And there is my finished card. I did end up making 2 using this sketch. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I share, I have all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is provided in the description box below. For card design number 6, I have some white shimmer paper for the background, and I use Honeybee Stamps Pierced Fluttering Heart die. So it adds this fun pierced heart detail all over the back. I layer that on some gray cardstock, and then I have 3 different stitched banner die cuts. Used this pink pattern paper with the white hearts and the gray hearts. I'm going to use some liquid adhesive to adhere them to the panel. And they're going to be fairly close together since there's not a lot of wiggle room on the edge. I'm trying to make sure to get them evenly spaced. They're not going to be exact, but it'll be fairly close. So for the larger banner, I'll attach it closer to the top of the card. And now I can attach this final banner toward the left. And using the liquid adhesive gives me that little bit of wiggle room before it adheres down. And I cut out a scalloped circle die cut using some gray cardstock that has a pearlescent finish on it. Just use some liquid adhesive to attach that. And then I'm going to add some pink and white twine to the top of the card. I put some ATG tape on the back side, and then I'll wrap 2 rows of this twine. And then just to make sure that twine isn't going to slip off later, I'm going to put some pieces of score tape on that back side. Remove the release paper, put some more ATG on the back of this panel, and then I can adhere it to my card base. I'm also going to add some liquid adhesive around the twine and on the top, just to make sure it's not going to pull away from the card base. I have had that happen before when I don't add the liquid adhesive. So the extra piece of twine, I'll tie a bow later, but first I'm going to work on the images. I'll be adding 2 of the waffle images. This time I stamped them on a light pink cardstock, and then for the syrup I used this darker pink cardstock. I glued the first waffle down, and then I popped up that second waffle. I'm using the I love you a Waffle Lot sentiment this time. Put those scrap pieces of cardstock on the left hand side of those sentiments where it goes off of the scallop circle die cut. I'll add some liquid adhesive to the back and attach them underneath the waffles on the left side. I think this waffle stamp set is one of the cutest stamp sets I've ever seen. I mean, look at those happy little waffles. So much fun. And naturally, I had to make some pink waffles. So once I have this sentiment attached, I'll tie the bow on the right-hand side, adjust the loops, and then just snip away the excess. Then to finish off the card, I'm going to use some more of the gems. This is like a clear or iridescent color. It has a really pretty sparkle. And I'm also going to add a little more detail to the waffles. I have some more Nuvo glitter drops. This is the White Blizzard color, which is one of my favorites. I use it so often the label is worn off of this bottle, but it keeps going. These really last a long time. So I'm putting it along that bottom edge of the syrup and also that bottom right-hand corner for the little squares on the waffle. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. And this stamp set is one you could use year-round. It doesn't need to be just for Valentine's Day cards. Now moving on to card design number 7. I wanted to use the Radiant Heart die again. For the background paper, I have this reddish pink watercolor design, and I just used the die in the very center. I'm going to layer this on some red cardstock. So first I'll add some liquid adhesive, trying to get all of those little areas so it doesn't pull away. So once that is all attached, I'm going to put my card front onto a card base, and I'm not leaving any of the white card base showing. There's not a lot of extra room with that large radiant die, and I didn't want it to go off the edge this time. Using that same die, I cut out a red heart, and I'm going to do some heat embossing. I first treat the paper with some anti-static powder, and I have some Versamark ink, and I'm going to stamp up this image a few times just to make sure I have a solid impression. And this stamp set is from Honeybee Stamps. It's their Heartfelt stamp set. So it has an assortment of different hearts with designs. So I thought it would look really pretty in the center of this heart. I'm using some glossy clear embossing powder by Love from Lizi. Even though it's clear embossing powder, it'll still add that extra detail and shine, especially on this dark red cardstock. So I'll heat set that. You can see some of that shine against my lights. And I'm going to pop this up with some foam tape. I'm using the standard 3M foam tape, so it's a little bit thicker. Try to get good coverage so there isn't one area that sags. I'll remove the release paper and then attach it right over that heart. For the sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out My Valentine, and this is from Honeybee Stamps Be Young set. So I have the stamp and the coordinating die. I'm leaving that on some white cardstock. I think it'll really pop against that red heart. And I'll adhere it using some liquid adhesive. Trying to make sure to get it fairly straight. And then finishing touch, I cut out an assortment of hearts using some pink and red glitter paper. And I used Honeybee Stamps Fluttering Heart die. There's an assortment of different size hearts and shapes on that die. So it's really fun. You can cut your own embellishments. So I'll put 4 of the hearts in the upper left-hand corner and then attach 3 of them in the lower right-hand corner. And I'm just gluing those down directly onto the paper using some liquid adhesive. The glitter cardstock I use is some leftover scraps from Love from Lizi monthly card kits. She always has some add-on paper bundles, and whenever she has those, I would pick those up. I love having that little bit of glitter. So there is my finished card. It's fairly simple, but I think it has a lot going on with the glitter heart and also those rays coming out from around that heart. So moving on to card design number 8. I'm going to use a card sketch this time. This is Mojo Monday sketch number 552. I'm using this pretty white and pink floral paper for the background. And for this smaller rectangle piece, I have a scrap of the pink paper with the white and gray hearts. And I'm just layering this on some pink cardstock. For the strip that goes all the way to the left, I have some ombre pink paper, and I decided not to layer that piece. For that smaller strip, I used some gray cardstock, and I did put a scrap piece of cardstock underneath that heart paper just to keep everything nice and level. I'll attach my card front onto that background layer, and this time that layer is an additional 1/4 of an inch versus the 1/8 of an inch that I generally add, and that's because the background paper is mostly white. I don't want to have part of the white card base showing if the main background of the card is white. I think it's too much. Instead of that circle image that's indicated on the sketch, I'm going to add 2 hearts. So I used Honeybee Stamps Radiant Heart die, just cut out one with the pattern paper. So this was actually from the previous card. And then that second heart, I used some cardstock that has a pearlescent finish. I'm going to add a couple of sentiments. So this is, I made this just for you. Just glue those on top of the heart. Just to make sure they're going to stay in place, I did put my acrylic block on top. And finishing off the card, I'm going to use some of the pink gem stickers in the upper and lower corner, and then added 2 of the white gem stickers on the left side of that left heart. So I did make a total of 5 cards, 2 in pink and 3 using some of the red pattern paper. On the red card, I used some red satin specialty paper and also red glitter cardstock for the hearts. At this point, here are all the leftover pattern paper scraps. I have a lot of 2-inch strips left over. So I selected this sketch from OWH, it's number 192. It works great to use up some of those thinner strips. I have some yellow cardstock for the background. I'll use some of the plaid pattern paper and also the paper that has that watercolor look that goes from orange to yellow. I'll layer the papers using that mirror cardstock. That's the Rustic Dusk cardstock, the one that's discontinued, unfortunately. For the strip that goes across the middle of the card, I'm using this burgundy polka dot paper. I did add that scrap piece of black cardstock just to keep everything nice and level, and you're not going to see it. I'll add some of Love from Lizi's peel-offs along the edge of that burgundy paper, and I only need to use some small pieces since most of it's going to be covered up. So this is always a great way to use up those little scraps of peel-offs since you never want to waste them. I'll add this to the mirror cardstock, just leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the border, and then I'll put my card front onto a card base. I will fill in that gap where I saved some of that precious Tonic Studio cardstock. So put my card front on the card base, and then for the image box I have some white shimmer paper, and I'm layering this on some burgundy cardstock that I just have on hand. It was just some scraps that I had left over. Before I adhere it down, I will add those scrap pieces of cardstock above and below where it's going to go over that burgundy polka dot paper. And I know this is a bit of an obsession when I add those scrap pieces of cardstock, but I really like everything to be nice and level. And when I don't add those pieces, you can see that noticeable little dip or dent from those layers underneath. So keeping everything nice and level really gives it a finished look. I stamped out the Happy Mail sentiment, used some orange ink, cut that out using the coordinating die, and then popped it up using some thin foam squares. I also stamped and colored a few of the Happy Mail envelopes. And I'll put them just around the sentiment. Finishing touch, pulling out the gem stickers. Put a couple in the upper right hand corner, and then a couple above that envelope on the left. I'm going to use some Nuvo glitter drops and add it to the heart on the envelope. So there is my finished card. I made 2 with basically the same pattern papers, and then I have 2 more, one in pink and one in red. This is one of my favorite sketches, and it's perfect when you have a bunch of those 2-inch pattern paper strips, which I always do about this point in my card baking. So now moving on to my final card design. This is card design number 10. I used some pearlescent gray cardstock and Honeybee Stamps barn wood plank dies. So I cut out all these different wooden planks, and then I'm going to adhere them onto some pink cardstock. Now the top and the lower plank, I did cut them just a little bit smaller, probably about 3/4 of an inch. That way I could fit all of them on this panel. So I'm just using liquid adhesive, working from the outside and going in, trying to make sure to space them evenly. And since I already did a similar card off screen, I had an idea of how much room I had between each of these planks. So I love all that wood plank detail from this die. I'll put this piece onto a white card base. I have that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Now the back side of this pink cardstock actually has a pearlescent finish, so I did put a little bit of liquid adhesive just to make sure it was going to stay in place. I have very little pattern paper left over, but it was enough I could cut these stitched circle die cuts. So I'm just using that black and white paper with the hearts. I'll layer all the circles on a scallop circle die cut using liquid adhesive since I am adhering them onto that pearlescent cardstock. Then I have some white shimmer paper. I decided I'm going to round all of the corners, and I'll do the same for that pink matted layer. Put this white panel onto that pink cardstock. A little bit of liquid adhesive since I have two pearlescent finishes going together. And then I'll lay out the 4 circles, trying to get them spaced evenly, and then adhere them using some liquid adhesive. Even though I didn't pull out a card sketch for inspiration, I am following OWH card sketch number 154. It is a sketch I've used probably hundreds of times. It's perfect for finishing off the last scraps of the pattern paper. So normally they're squares, but I thought it'd be fun to do the circles instead. So after I attach that piece, I'm going to work on the sentiment. Have my favorite Happy Mail sentiment, and I did heat emboss that using some of the clear embossing powder, mostly because it wasn't drying on this cardstock. So that was a great way to make sure it's not going to smear. I layered that a couple times using the outline die. I just shifted them off slightly for some extra interest, and then adhere it to my card. Then I cut out 5 different envelopes, 3 of them with the little heart and 2 without, and I just stamped these on the pink cardstock. I also heat embossed them with that clear embossing powder. So I'm just laying them across the bottom of the card, kind of staggering them back and forth. And I'm gluing them down using some liquid adhesive. Then I wanted to add a little more color to the hearts on the envelope, so I'm using a Copic marker. I believe this is the RV25 color. Just filled that in, super simple coloring. And to finish off the card, I'm going to pull out some more of the gem stickers, just using the pink. I'll put 2 in the upper right hand corner and then 3 in that lower left hand corner of the square. So there is my finished card, and I did have enough scraps to make 3. So I have 2 with that pink and gray, and then 1 with the orange and red and yellow colors. I'm really loving the look of those wood plank dies by Honeybee Stamps. Here are all the leftover pattern paper scraps, only 6 small pieces left over. And I will add those to my scrap box. I'm collecting all of the pattern paper scraps from my paper pad videos for the year. And at the end of the year, I'm going to try to make probably a dozen, I don't know, maybe 10 cards. I think I'm going to have a lot of scraps left over. In addition to the paper pad, I also used 5 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 10 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. I made a total of 28 cards using Honeybee Stamps Love Letters 6x6 paper pad. This collection is beautiful. I love the vibrant colors. I will have links provided in the description box for most of the products used in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.